Good afternoon and welcome. I'm Giancarlo Grasso, Director of Strategy and Business Planning at AMCHAM Korea. Thank you for joining us today for our panel discussion, Addressing the Gender Gap in the Financial Industry, hosted by AMCHAM's Women's Leadership Committee. The Women's Leadership Committee, co-chaired by Christina An of Morgan Phillips, Eunmi Chae of FedEx, and Claudia Hong of Shin Kim, strives to help companies develop competencies and increase inclusion of women at all levels of the corporate environment and increase productive engagement in the workforce. Today, we will be discussing the evolving gender landscape in the financial industry, hearing various perspectives from leaders in this area. Christina An, Managing Director of Morgan Phillips and co-chair of the Women's Leadership Committee, will moderate the session today. Our panel consists of 4 leaders in the financial industry: Claudia Hong, a senior foreign attorney at Shin Kim and a co-chair of the Women's Leadership Committee; Henry An, the head of diversity and inclusion at Samil PwC and a strategy leader in tax markets; Nina Michaels Kim, Director of Partnerships for Korea and Japan at the Institute of Management Accountants; and Eunice Kim, the Executive Director at the leading ESG and impact investor firm, D3 Jubilee Partners. Utilizing webinars to provide valuable insights to our member companies is a crucial goal at AMCHAM. We hope this webinar will be beneficial in exploring the evolving landscape in the financial industry as organizations work to foster inclusiveness and diversity. We continually strive to enhance business and trade relations between Korea and the United States. I want to thank our speakers for sharing this valuable content with us today. Without further ado, let me hand it over to Christina.
All right, thank you, Gian, for the introduction. AMCHAM's Women's Leadership Committee has held a series of talks focusing on women leaders from across various sectors. The last one featured women leaders from tech. The one before was women in entrepreneurship. And today we have some wonderful experts to share their insight on the financial industry. This panel discussion is particularly important as Korea announced some new policies around ESG, which affect women's leadership roles in all sectors in Korea. So before we start, I thought it would be helpful for us to look at some numbers that could help to set the stage. And I think what I'll do is, all right, but before we go on to the statistics, I'd like to quickly do an audience poll to check how long all of you have been in the financial industry and also what generation you belong to. And this is not really to discriminate against everyone, but we just want to make sure that the panelists have an idea of how long you've been, like what knowledge you have about the industry. So if you could take the next minute or two to just do this poll, and we can share with the panelists. All right. Oh, so more than 50% are not from the financial industry or work in finance positions. 20% of you have been in this industry for over 15 years. And then there are about 17% who have been in it less than 5 years, right? And then what generation do you belong to? We have about an equal number of millennials and Gen Xers joining today's webinar. So that's great. I think our panelists are also kind of a mix of millennials and Gen Xers. So hopefully what they will share today will resonate with all of you. All right, so let me just go quickly to the numbers. All right, so as the panelists and I were preparing and reading up on some research around this area, there were 3 themes that emerged, right? One is the pipeline for senior roles in the financial industry. Number 2 is the gender bias that starts with recruitment, development and the promotion process within these financial services firms. And last but not least is the question of gender quotas and how do we measure gender diversity as we move forward, and how do we measure progress in the as we try to push more diversity in the finance sector. All right, so I wanted to quickly share some numbers with you. Let me just, right? So representation of women on executive committees in major financial services firms by country. So the global average is about 20% are taken up by women. If you see here, Korea is at 4%. It's not a huge surprise. And this is from Oliver Wyman's study done in 2019. And I believe not much progress has been done since then. And then representation of women on corporate boards by region. If you see here, Northern Europe leads the pack with Korea at 2.4%. Asia Pacific average is about 12.4%. So percentage of board of directors who are women. So we lag, or we're a little bit ahead of the Middle East. All right. And, you know, as we talk about the recruitment and retention and development and promotion of women in the financial industry, you know, I thought it would be interesting to look at some studies done by McKinsey. You know, what are some different perspectives on success factors, comparing the opinions of entry-level professionals and senior-level women? The biggest difference, turns out, is the senior women said that earlier on in their careers, they didn't really understand how important it was to have a sponsorship by a senior leader for you to move up the corporate ladder in the financial industry. So I thought that was interesting that the gap was the biggest here. Reasons for lack of women in senior roles. Let's see, challenges of work-life balance. So there's always like that mid-career stall for women who have to go and, you know, raise a family and things like that. And let's see, entry-level women are less likely than men to have managers who act as their advocates to help them identify opportunities. So that comes up as a repeated theme in the financial industry. Okay, so without further ado, I'm gonna hand it. Now I'm just gonna go to all the panelists. If you could turn on your cameras. All right, so welcome all of you. I'm gonna actually start with a very universal question for all of you. So this is something that I've heard over and over again, and I'd like to believe this, but I like to ask all of you, success in finance does not depend on gender. Do you think that a woman in finance has equal chances with a man? And if so, why are there so few women in finance? Right? So I'd like to first go to Eunice. I mean, I know during the introduction, your background wasn't properly, you know, at length introduced, but you've worked in so many financial institutions like Lehman Brothers and Morgan Stanley and Standard Chartered as an equity analyst and researcher and all of that, and now working as a venture capitalist. So Eunice, do you think that a woman in finance has equal chances with a man? What are your thoughts on it?
Short answer is actually no. Definitely, although the overall environment around gender gap is getting better, I still see some inequalities from the recruitment process in Korea. Unfortunately, this career gap widens as we go up corporate ladders. And as the finance is traditionally regarded as men's area amongst all businesses, there are always few women. Good news, though, is that there are of late more female professionals in finance than before. But bad news is that the increase in front offices are still lagging that of middle or back offices. And most importantly, there are few female top ranks in sizable corporates. All in all, we see some improvement in quantity, but not much in quality. That's my view for now.
That's interesting coming from someone who's been in the industry for now over 20 years, right? In different companies. How about Claudia? Can I hear from Claudia?
Yeah, I mean, I think also for me, you know, I was in the financial services industry for a long time in the US. So most of my personal experiences are in the US. I think generally speaking, men and women tend to start off with more or less equal chances, just by the fact that the sheer ratio of men and women entering the workforce. But as we've talked about, you know, I think when it comes to promotions and leadership positions, for various reasons, we tend to see, unfortunately, less women in those ranks, I think.
How about Nina? Nina, can you share some kind of global perspective with us?
Yes, sure. Thank you. Yes. I did want to also add to some of the numbers you presented, Christina, because IMA, the organization that represents accountants, both managing and public accountants, we also have some members who are public accountants and working at organizations such as PwC, like Henry's. And what we have found, we have did a landmark report last year, together with the California CPA Society. And we interviewed about at least 50 and then surveyed 3,000 accountants. And what we found, 33% of the women thought that the profession was still inequitable. And also the several factors, you know, this is coming down to what are the reasons, right? We also back up the stats that you said, Christina, but the top three I would like to share is one was unfair prejudice and bias. I believe bias is definitely a relevant factor that wasn't really mentioned in the other previous report. You know, I'm in this Gen X factor, and you know, I was asked during interviews, are you gonna have kids soon? Are you gonna be pregnant back then? You know, and so these are like bias that people don't hire. So so I also think like the recruitment stage is definitely a problem, and possibly as you get older, right, the challenges. I don't think people do that anymore. It's probably against the law, hopefully, in many countries. But that was the first factor. Then the second factor, so 66% said that there was a lack of mentors and sponsors, and that's what was echoed in the reports, and also what Claudia and Eunice said. Then the third factor was, again, the same thing that Eunice said again, but more emphasis on recruitment and not retaining. And that's one of the biggest factors also that we also saw, and what we want to emphasize more in the future initiatives.
Well, I think, you know, I think it's great that you're sharing additional numbers with us, right? And I think we can go right to Henry and ask, would you agree, you know, as the male lead for inclusion and diversity at Samil PwC. We're all very interested in what you have to say, Henry, on this.
Okay.
On
is it
this
just me, or is it kind of hot in here? Well, thanks for that, guys. And I guess you know, I'll give my perspective. I mean, I think it's a bit of a mixed bag. I think similar to what some of the other panelists had mentioned, you know, I think that when we're talking about entry-level positions, I think that in this day and age, I think we're kind of at parity. And by the way, I'm not pandering to the audience, but I'll say, you know, for what it's worth, my own personal view is that women tend to interview a lot better than men in terms of providing thoughtful, articulate responses, and they just come off as being smarter, at least smarter than me. So just wanted to get that off my chest first to get some brownie points. But we talked a little bit about statistics, and So what I can tell you guys is that we find that in terms of the recruitment pool, and I'm referring to the pool of candidates that we pull from, there tend to be, from the onset, there tend to be more men than women. Okay, and so
You mean the
Nina,
pool itself?
the pool itself. So Nina, I know you cited some statistics, and I can cite some Korea-specific statistics about accountants. Females represent approximately 30% of those passing the CPA exam in Korea. And so I just mentioned that, and obviously my organization recruits a lot of non-CPAs as well, but I wanted to cite that to make a point that in many organizations, there's gender imbalance right from the onset. Okay. I think that it's not going to come as a surprise. I mean, I guess we also find that the number of female professionals in our organization tends to decrease as they move up the ranks, and acknowledge that some of this is driven by what I would describe as differences in promotion rates between the genders.
Right.
Although that's, to be honest, that's going away. But some of it's also driven by attrition of female professionals due to the need or desire to focus on family. So I would say that while I wouldn't say that success in finance, it may not depend on gender, but it's certainly impacted by it. And, especially at the upper levels. And, I know that most organizations use a balanced scorecard to perform evaluations of personnel. But at the upper levels, right, I think in this profession, client relationships, business development, revenue generation, those are all really important. And I think that gender representation at clients of the industry, that's also really important as well. So, especially at the decision-making level. So there's a lot of factors that can potentially impact the success of female professionals.
Right. I think that point is very important in that the decision makers at the client organizations tend to be all, male dominated. So therefore the professional services firms, at least, they are biased towards that as well, right? And I see that Eunmi, who's our fellow co-chair of Women's Leadership Committee, has also joined the panel. Eunmi, do you have anything to add to this? I know you're not in the financial industry, but you have, so many years of experience leading other women leaders. So I'd be very interested
it's a
to hear.
surprise that I was not, aware that I was supposed to say something, but yes. As you know, I'm working for FedEx, logistic industry, and very conventional and traditional industry compared with the finance industry. So as you can imagine, compared with the passenger airlines, cargo industry is known as very tough and also very male dominant. So just one episode I still remember, I do not want to name names, but a long time ago, the Minister of the Transportation and Land, every year, a New Year holiday, right after New Year holiday, he had a big meeting with the logistic industry CEOs, right? And guess what? About 100, the logistic industry, the CEOs. And out of 100, I was the only female CEO. And I remember after his speech, there was a kind of a Q&A session. And always he started with, do you have any questions? If not, what about Eunmi, the only 홍일점? It's like a red flower, meaning the only female leader. Why don't you, ask some questions? Initially, I thought it's very embarrassing, right? Then after my second thought, I thought, maybe this is a good opportunity for me to speak up and then address some industrial issues, right? So I remember I stood up bravely and I said, compared with the Korea Post, for example, FedEx, we do not get the fair treatment, something like that. And it was very effective, the channel to address the industry issues. So I think my point is, yes, we are still minority, but we should play our card right, and then we should take advantage of all the good opportunities.
What about, I have a question for you, Eunmi. In your organization, do you have, I mean, you must have a really big finance team, right? Are they mostly like, what's the gender balance there?
Yeah, actually, because of job nature, I have 1,200 employees here in Korea, but majority of them are operational employees doing pickups and deliveries and aircraft handling. But functional teams like HR, finance, and marketing, we have many the female professionals.
Right.
But organization size-wise, it is not that big because we have Asia Pacific headquarters located in Hong Kong, and also they are supporting us. That's why I think we have a relatively lean organization here in Korea.
Right. Okay. Right. But, you know, I guess I was trying to see, since we're focusing on like women in finance, right? So in an organization like FedEx, within the finance department, you know, do you have women, men leaders? But anyway, let's move on. So I think both Jian and I forgot to mention that if any of you have questions, there's the Q&A bubble on the bottom of Zoom. So you can just type your questions. And as we go along, if I feel that the questions are relevant to what the speakers are talking about at that moment, I will ask them. If not, we'll save the questions at the end towards the last 10 minutes. All right. Okay, so now I'm gonna go on to my next question, which is, you know, Eunmi just shared some of her like personal experience being a leader in a very male-dominated industry. How about for the panelists here? I mean, could you share some poignant experiences that you've had, some personal anecdotes that is not too depressing or, you know, would bring us down, but something that could really speak to the audience? Let's start with Claudia. You know, Claudia, you've had a very diverse range of experiences in different industries as well as US and Korea, right? So how has it been for you?
Yeah, thanks for that question. You know, I think we've talked a lot about recruitment and retention, and I think especially nowadays, I'm reading a lot about how, you know, it's not just an initiative, but it's really becoming retention. Companies' abilities to retain talent is becoming a major KPI. And I think for me, how I got started in finance, actually, I wasn't even thinking. An organization called Goldman Sachs came to our campus. And, they said, look, you know, we're going to try and invite certain female students who have a certain GPA. And that's how I actually found out about what Goldman Sachs was, and they really encouraged us to apply. Back then, I don't know if you guys remember, but Polo Ralph Lauren was a hot label, a major brand, and it went IPO. I'm dating myself, but it was that kind of sort of camaraderie, women executives saying, hey, we can do it too. It's not just an old boys club. And so I thought that was interesting. But then, in my early 30s, I was given a lot of opportunities by both male and female sponsors who really gave me opportunities to, showcase and grow and, get into positions where I had some quote unquote decision-making authority. And that was really interesting for me because no one really trained me. No one really trained me to be in those positions yet. Here I was, I think I was like 31 or 32 when I was made corporate VP of Bank of New York Mellon. And then one of my tasks was, you guys, I had to day-to-day manage 5 managing directors, so higher than me, males, who were very good at what they did. But of course, you can imagine how it must have been like to be managed by someone much younger. So that was interesting. So I think, what I want to just say there is, we've talked about pipeline of senior roles. I think really just, having those people who not only just mentor you and be your ally and supporters, but who give you those positions and then also help you to succeed in those positions.
Right. So I think that's one of the key points that the McKinsey study pointed out as well, right? Like having that kind of sponsorship. It's sponsorship to me is a little different from mentorship, right? So you just
Absolutely.
need that kind of, I think in Korean we call that like line. I don't know. Is that right? Anyway, yeah, how about Nina? Nina, how about your kind of personal experiences? I'm very interested to hear.
Thank you. And my experience is, again, like Claudia, but mine even more so is from an experience of a woman working abroad. And when I first started out, I had also, I was recruited in a kind of a prestigious management training program. And there was only 2 candidates that was selected at that time. One was myself, and I'm part Asian, and American, and a woman, and the other candidate was a Swiss white male. And we were supporting, we had mutual assignments, but somehow he had better chances and better assignments. And I think it was in Switzerland, there's also compulsory military service, kind of similar to Korea. So it seemed like he knew the people more, like an old boys club. He had chummy relationships with them, could talk about military things, etc. And I was always sort of an outsider, and there was bias. I was part of a pan-European task force, and I was glad he was also there. But I was the only one asked to get the coffee, and it really hurt a little bit because I felt like we were sort of similar age, but I had higher academic background. And nobody else was asked to do that. And so it was very humiliating, and I sort of protested, but I decided not to at the end, because another guy, he wasn't like a sponsor, but on the task force, he was like, no, don't protest. It's just do it now, And I had, nobody spoke up for me or anything. They were just like, but I was like, had to get the copy for them. And that was, or secretary roles, also me all the time, like in the panel, take the minutes, so it was sort of those kind of biases. I'm Gen X, right? So I want to say that hopefully it's much better for the newer generations. But I do want to protest because in the research that I just mentioned, and this was in last year, many women of color are still being asked to do secretarial roles or mistaken for a custodian or janitor. So this kind of bias and stereotyping still takes place. So people, women and people, women of color, they're like a double whammy. I did want to highlight this, and I don't want to be too depressing though. So, and I just want to say, Gen X, you don't actually know this term, sponsorships. I never knew it until until maybe now, when I'm working for the nonprofit. Actually, when I was working, I didn't even know this term, and nobody offered. I never went and sought out sponsors. Only one time in my previous company, somebody became a sponsor. It wasn't like I said that, but was promoting me. But I'm so glad that we're talking about this now for earlier career women now. I mean, to get this is so important, not just mentors, but sponsors.
Right. I mean, I think it's so important that like the importance of sponsorship is being highlighted, and that now more and more organizations are institutionalizing it, right, into their HR promotion development processes. So I think that's what's important. Now I'm going to go to Henry and ask, I mean, I doubt that you've experienced that much discrimination in the financial industry as a male, but if you could share some insight on your general kind of experiences, or even PwC specific experiences that you've witnessed and observed.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks. So I'm not going to share any kind of specific anecdotal experience that I underwent, but I think that, and I'll keep it brief because I think I was a little bit long-winded in responding to the earlier question. But I guess what I wanted to convey is, Christina, at the beginning of this session, you shared some materials, and, I think the statistics for Korea were pretty underwhelming. We just plainly did bad. And, I think it was a little bit disappointing. And Nina, I was listening to what you're saying, and wow, I can only imagine, because I've never had those kind of experiences, and it's certainly touching to hear. But I think maybe I'd like to kind of send a little message of hope and some
Yeah.
optimism to the group.
Please.
I mean,
Yes,
so when I turn back the
please.
clock, and I'm Generation X. I'm not a boomer. Generation X. Not that there's anything wrong with being a boomer. The boomers here.
Are you sure?
Yeah. But when I look back at the profession and my firm over a period of 30 years,
Mhm.
we're talking about night and day. Back in the 90s, it was definitely a male-dominated workplace, and we're talking about smoke-filled offices, ashtrays in every conference room, lots of testosterone everywhere, and there were only a small handful of female professionals, and certainly not at the partner level. But now, I'm really pleased to say that our firm has a completely different look now, and don't get me wrong. I mean, yeah, there's still plenty of room for improvement. There always is. But we've definitely made progress, steady progress. It takes time. It's not easy. And I think we all need to be vigilant by doing things like this, and talking it out, and getting ideas and sharing best practices, so we can all be agents of change. But, look at the statistics. I mean, success isn't going to be reached overnight, and it's really, it's a journey, right? It's a journey, and it's going to take time, but I'm optimistic. I really am. So
can I ask, at PwC right now, what's the ratio of men to women partners, senior management? Is that
okay?
sensitive?
You're putting me on the spot,
question?
and it's nothing for us to brag about. But I would say over the last few years, we're in the low double digits in terms of percentage. So I think we're making progress. I think, and we've got a lot of different initiatives in place that will continue to increase that. And the end game, the goal is that all our promotions, including promotions to partner, are proportional to gender representation. And so that's the goal, and we're giving ourselves some time to reach it, but we still have a way to go.
So there's definitely like an intentional kind of, company driven like initiative to make that happen, right? And you're the champion of that for Korea.
It's a group effort, but yes, I'm the one who's serving as the champion.
Ask, how is it, in most companies, they usually hire like chief diversity officer or like champions of these D&I efforts, and they make sure that it's like a female minority, so how did you get to be in that role for PwC Korea?
That's a really good question, Christine. I'm not sure I have a great answer for you. I think that I suspect that it's somewhat attributable. I'm head of diversity and inclusion, right? And I'm a non-CPA, and I'm Korean American, and so I have a very unique background compared to a lot of folks, and I have a very different perspective on things. And so I think maybe that played into it. All things considered, wanting
I see.
we're talking about Korea, for better or worse, it's a very homogeneous society, isn't it? I mean, looking at the last names here, 20% of our population has the last name Kim, right? That's about as homogeneous as you can get, right? And so I think that, you know, in order to kind of promote change, I do think that you need to have an advocate that thinks differently. But having said
Right.
that, and this is kind of bleeding into the next question, but I would say that having leadership support is critical. So it's not about me serving as inclusion and diversity leader. It's really about the tone at the top and how the leadership behaves and how they push and prioritize this topic. And so that's really key.
Yeah, because I think a lot of us and probably the audience is interested in what PwC is doing, right? In terms of your inclusion and diversity actions and initiatives. So I think that's very helpful. Thank you for sharing. Now, I'm going to go to Eunice. Now, I know you can spend like a week without sleeping to share your personal experiences in being in so many different types of financial institutions in Korea. Eunice, can you share a few kind of interesting anecdotes with us?
Sure, thanks. I would say my experience is probably as depressing as Nina's. Yeah, I'm also a Gen Xer, so pretty similar, but still a little worse in Korea. Sorry about to say that, but yeah, I started my career at one of top chaebol groups in Korea. I was only female out of my 100 newly hired colleagues. I quit after 2 years to attend the grad school. After a master's degree, I joined the financial industry. And from that day, I was always the first female to take this role and that role, and used to be stressed out in order not to give all women a bad name. So in order not to become a stumbling block to other women who may follow my path, I was always conscientious. But as you know, men seldom have this issue. And with any kind of policy support and more mentors and sponsors, as we know, as other panelists mentioned, it would have been much easier for me to survive in finance, I assume. And just hearing what Nina, Claudia, Eunmi, and Henry are saying, I again realized that this inequality, gender inequality, is a very complex matter, and it's not the fault of particular party or person. And there are a lot of things to be done. But since Christina, you showed at the very front of the beginning of this session, I would like to touch the gender quota or ESG mandates issues a little bit. Despite various policy changes at the government level, I hardly see a noticeably higher rate of women at the executive and management level yet. Not to mention board of directors, female executives are less than 5%. As you said, it's actually 3% at most conglomerates in Korea. However, I see multinationals, more and more multinationals, including financial companies, are hiring more women at the executive and management level. There are various reasons behind this trend, but ESG mandates are definitely one of them, I believe. And, gender equity in the corporate world has long been a goal that's paid much lip service. And unsatisfied with slow progress, a handful of countries have embraced the idea of gender quotas to govern corporate boards over the last 10 to 20 years. Quotas to remedy gender inequality brought big changes in business, in my view. First, the share of women on board is at an all-time high, at least in Europe. And two, the impact of action to bring in more women is striking. Although progress is slower at senior executive level.
So you mentioned this topic of quotas, right? And I shared some statistics early on about that. Like, how do you guys feel about, this quota? There's like the 30% club, more and more mandates are being put in place to say, okay, a certain percentage of leadership or board appointments have to be women. I mean, do you think that's helpful, or it just fuels more tension? Anyone want to talk about that? Claudia?
Christina, oh, I'm
Or-
sorry, didn't mean to cut Claudia. I just, you know, maybe I'll put
Yeah, yeah.
a stake in the sand. And apologies because, I'm coming from an accounting firm background. So we're always working with numbers and data.
Mhm.
And so I'm going to advocate the benefits
Mhm.
of statistics for a second. And then, if the other panelists disagree, then that's fine. But, I really think that transparency and reporting, and
Mhm.
again, even that ESG topic, that it's all about reporting, right? To hold people accountable, right? Um,
Mhm.
it's beneficial because it keeps everybody honest, and it helps monitor progress that's made in
Mhm.
relation to D&I. Um, there's
Mhm.
a famous management guru named Peter Drucker, and he's often quoted as, "You can't manage what you can't measure," right? And it's true. It's important to take an honest look at your organization and kind of really understand where you are right now, and then kind of figure out what are the relevant metrics that you should be looking at to kind of
Mhm.
improve. And every organization's different, so these metrics, these I guess KPIs, they're all going to be bespoke. So in my
Mhm.
organization, Kristen, you asked about,
Yeah.
what are some of the things that we're looking at? Well, we're looking at percentage
Yeah.
of female partner promotions. We're looking at
Yeah.
proportionality of promotions, female representation in our experienced hires. We're looking at female
Mhm.
membership into our leadership group, female partners handling key accounts. So it's all
Mhm.
data driven. Um, but
Mhm.
it's a powerful way to measure. And I think, again, it's all about accountability. And I'm a little worried here that I'm overemphasizing the importance of these numbers because what I don't want to get lost is that that's just measurement. The important thing is what you're doing to get to those numbers and achieve
Mhm. Right.
improvements, right? So you asked
Right.
about
Right.
what are some of the things that we're doing at PwC.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm. Mhm.
and it's all, and I totally empathize with everything the panelists said, and we're trying to address those types of issues. And a key element of that in making our organization a more attractive place to work is
Yeah.
flexibility, right?
Mhm.
Not only flexibility in the hours, but just providing people with time off when they need it. Um, accommodating folks that want to work on a part-time basis. Um,
Mhm.
handling kind of providing daycare services, just, really trying to make it easier to be able to raise a family and work at the same time. And
Right.
another theme that came up was the sponsorship, right? And
Mhm.
so we're going to be rolling out a sponsorship program that helps, from our senior leadership to guide our female professionals and really mentor them. So I think that's wonderful. And I would even say that, just little things like awareness, right? Some people, I'm embarrassed to say, some people still don't understand the importance of diversity and inclusion. And
Mhm.
it's about building awareness. So we're rolling out a learning and educational module to help people understand and, really get people on the bus. So, those are just some of the things that we're doing, and hopefully we'll be able to make progress.
Right. So you're saying you're all for quotas because that's really the only way we can say.
I wouldn't say quotas. We've got goals that we want to hit, and we're measuring our KPIs so that over time we're going to hit those goals. Right.
Right. I mean,
So
that
it's,
takes us, yeah, it's the same, same concept. I mean, that takes us to my next kind of theme, which was how do we measure progress, right? So I think that is a nice segue.
Sorry, I jumped the shark.
Yeah, and we're receiving a lot of really interesting questions. So I allocated the last 10 minutes of our webinar to questions. So I'm just going to quickly go over this topic of how do we measure progress in the next 5 minutes or so, and then we'll jump into questions. Okay. So Nina, can you share your thoughts with us on how do we measure progress? Is this like all this talk about quotas and having women leaders, like, is this just an ESG related hype?
So I would just echo what Henry said. We're both speaking for the same accounting industry. And one thing that I did want to say is that in addition to that US report that I just mentioned earlier in the first question, we are in the process of doing a regional report. So the Asia Pacific region and also a global report. And as part of this, we invited regional accounting association, professional accounting organizations to join. And of course, we reached out to the KICPA, Korean Institute of CPAs. And I told you during the dry run what their answer would be, because as in order to participate in this research project and this initiative, they also had to nominate D&I advocates, people who would lead and promote change. And I'm sorry to say that they declined to participate at this time. And I fully understand their reasons. They said it's a new area. They have not done many activities or research so far in D&I initiatives. So, but this goes to say, right, that it is showing that maybe the Korean market is slightly behind. And there is low awareness. And I always hate to be a damper to what Henry says, all the positive things he does, but there are more to improve. And I want to defer to other experts of the local market, but so one positive thing is we are trying to do this, and we made sure that we maintain the contact with KICPA. They will participate in future, but at this moment in 2022 they're not ready.
That's really too bad and disappointing to hear. Well, how about Eunice? Can you, what are your thoughts on how do we measure progress? How do we measure progress from a VC's point of view?
Measurement is, I actually do not much, think about, even because I think, before, we measure, the progress, there are still so much, things to be done in terms of, policy. Because, so it's not, for me, it's not enough. Still, just implement the quota. Quota is still, it has a lot more to go. So I'm a big believer in power of policy enforcement. Good intentions are not enough to bring mindset change. Mentality change only follow policy changes. I of course do recognize a lot of side effects prompted by the quota policy. Nevertheless, I argue that any country's gender quota system is definitely a stepping stone to executive managerial roles for women at the early stage, because quotas help rectify women's underrepresentation in prominent positions, especially in Korea. As you can see, earlier part of this session, we've seen the numbers, and definitely quotas make it entirely normal for women to take up managerial roles in the economic system. So of course the measurement, I like Henry's comment about Drucker's comment. So yeah, definitely I agree. And there are certain things we also to measure startups. But for me, before measurement, let's implement some policy change first.
Yeah.
In
Right.
Korea. Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, I guess different companies are at different levels of kind of implementing and measuring, right? So maybe PwC is kind of ahead of everyone else. You guys are focused very much on measurement now, whereas a lot of these Korean companies are just starting to hire women even, right, into their higher ranks. So, okay, well, before I jump into questions, I want to ask Claudia, do you have anything to add in addition to what they've already shared?
I think, as the token lawyer, I just did want to
Yeah,
say
that's
one,
right.
we're talking about policy change,
Mhm.
regulatory, legal change, I think,
Mhm.
hopefully can help rather than be a hurdle.
Yeah.
In that sense, I think, all of you are familiar probably with a change to the Capital Markets Act that occurred 2 years ago. And I think it's about to take effect in August, I believe August 5th of this year. So my understanding is that any listed company in Korea with total assets of 2 trillion Korean won or more should
Mhm.
not have an all male or, for that matter, all female board. So that's why we've been seeing, I think,
Yeah.
in the news and hopefully in your own organizations as well, companies scrambling to get females to join their board. So I think it'll be interesting. I totally agree with what all the panelists have said, especially Henry, with numbers, accountability, all those things are important to measure our progress. And what I just wanted to add there is, I've advised management in various industries, including the public sector.
Yeah.
And I wish I could see more supporting evidence with numbers
Sure.
to show those in management that this is a business case, that there is business impact, that there are benefits, tangible benefits to be had by having diverse teams. And I think Henry and others may have mentioned this as well about, clients demanding, especially for those of us in the legal industry. I think I'm joined by several in our audience. When clients and potential clients ask, who's on my team? I've seen that on RFPs. I've seen people ask.
Yeah.
I'm now seeing more and more
Right.
women in decision-making positions to be able to hire outside counsels. And so holding us accountable, each other accountable, I think is huge.
Yeah.
And I think there's been progress, and hopefully we'll see more and more companies making that an important change.
Right. Well, I think that's very important insight, Claudia. Thank you. We have about 7 minutes left, and we have some really, really interesting questions. So I'm going to jump right into it. So someone asked, gender wage gap wise, Korea is ranked #1, right, amongst all OECD countries. Could the panelists share how this agenda, the wage gap, is being addressed in your organizations? Henry,
Before Henry, let me share. because among these all panel members, I think I'm the only baby boomer, and I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud of that. And so my story is back in 1985, right after I was graduated from university, Korean Air. I name a company name, but Korean Air was my first employer. And I remember back then, it was almost like 40 some years ago, right? And almost. And then I remember my first salary there, compared with my male counterpart, somehow my salary grade was 3 notches lower. For example, mine was 27 and theirs was 24. And then back then I was younger and I was more brave. I couldn't accept that. And then I started to complain a lot. And then pretty much that was my main motive to transfer to FedEx, only after working for Korean Air less than 1 year. Then FedEx, this is an American company, and so far as we have the so-called common job grading, right? So far as we have the same job grade, regardless of gender, regardless of race, educational background or religion, the salary is the same, male and the female. So I think probably not only FedEx, but American companies are probably there is no salary gap between the male employees and female employees. So that is the fact I wanted to share.
Right. Well, that's very, very helpful. Thank you. about Henry, is there, I mean, as the I&D chair at PwC, have you seen any, major gap between pay
You
amongst?
know, I think that's certainly an area that we pay careful attention to.
Mhm.
And I'm not sure you know that our organization is representative of your general organization,
Yeah.
but we have different levels of experience and
Mhm.
titles, and we have kind of remuneration levels, right? And I think that it's pretty representative of a meritocracy because
Okay.
good people,
Yeah.
and that's, we're a people business, right? I mean,
Mhm.
everything's driven by the quality
Mhm.
of our workforce.
Mhm.
If they're not satisfied with the remuneration, they
Yeah.
can easily leave, and unfortunately, they've got great job opportunities as well. So we often have a lot of our really fantastic personnel move on to greener pastures. So it's something that, again, getting back to my theme earlier, kind of measurement.
Mhm.
You can actually look at the bands and kind of make sure that there isn't any kind of systematic bias that's taking place.
Right. I mean, I would imagine that in terms of the wage gap at the professional levels, it's probably not due to gender, right? I think the OECD statistics probably reveal, like all different sectors at the macro level, right? So,
Mhm.
Claudia, how about in the legal profession? I'm curious.
Yeah, again, I think I'm probably hammering my theme again of the difference between entry level and senior position.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to speak for all types of legal
Yeah.
jobs. Certainly, those in-house positions, Christina,
Yeah.
you would probably know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can certainly speak about that. I think, it's about the position and what that's
Sure,
offering
sure.
and what the candidate, him or her, is bringing with them to the
Yeah.
candidates. But as far
Yeah.
as law firms are concerned, I think, certainly I've seen where associates, I think, are more vocal than I think I'm a Gen X, and then when I enter the workforce. So
Right, right.
I'm certainly seeing that at the associate level, there's more equality, and
Mm-hmm.
it depends on sort of your years of practice,
Mm-hmm.
especially those who are not lateraling in, but who start their careers at a firm.
Right.
You see more equality. But then when it comes to partners,
Mm-hmm.
there are different types of partnerships, as you know.
Yeah.
So a lot of it is myself, for example, I'm a contract partner, so I don't necessarily know what another contract partner is
Yeah,
making.
sure.
And again, but at the end of the day, it's becoming more and more about the numbers, the money,
Sure.
so I think that's interesting point.
Okay, great. I just realized I've been doing a really terrible job as moderator of keeping time. We have 2 minutes left and we still have like 3 more questions. So, but I don't think we can go over time. So I think I am going to have to wrap it up. What we can do is someone asked for me to share the slides with the statistics with the audience. So I think what I'll do is maybe sum up some of the questions as well with some of your answers and send it out to all the audience members. So please be reminded that this webinar will be available on the AMCHAM website as well as the AMCHAM YouTube channel, which you want to subscribe to. So thank you so much for all of your participation, to all the expert panelists today. And Eunmi, I'm sorry I kind of dragged you into this, but thank you for your input and insight. And yeah, I think it's very worthwhile for us to continue the dialogue on, gender diversity. The Women's Leadership Committee almost every quarter designates a theme, and we invite different speakers and panelists to talk on different issues involving diversity and gender. So we hope that we can you can continue to come join us, whether it's offline or online. And
Christina, I would love
I
to
think-
share once the regional report is done at a future
Yeah.
event, because there's also solutions. Somebody mentioned about sponsorship.
Oh,
We
yeah.
have detailed solutions about that too. So in a
That would be
future
great.
stage, yeah.
That would be great. I mean, yeah, any kind of data provides us with more insight, then that allows us to track and measure. All right, thank you very much. And all of you have a great afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks,
So
guys.
Bye.
nice to meet
Bye.
everybody, all the panelists.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank